Hello dear viewers, support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it, and also make sure you comment your thought. Now let's start the video. He walked the halls of Winterfell like a ghost on his 12th name day. No servants turned to pat him on the cheek or rub his hair. Even had they known of his name day, fear of his good mother would have stopped that. Arya and Robb remembered, but no one else. At breakfast, Robb gave him a small banner emblazoned with the sigil of a dire wolf, the teeth ready to pounce. Arya had woken him up with a full mug of icy water dumped on his head. She then embraced him and asked if they could practice archery. He would have loved nothing more than to spend a day with his true-born sister and brother, but they all had duties. Robb sat with Lord Stark to hear news delivered by merchants from White Harbor. Arya had lessons with Septa Mordane on needlework and embroidery. Although she often hid instead, Jon was tasked with inspecting the towers to ensure that the watch turrets on the inner walls were clean of crows and ravens. The two towers near the great main gate were well maintained, but there were a dozen smaller ones, still useful in war, and he laboriously checked the granite and stonework of the inner walls. The sun was nearly overhead when Jury Castle took him to Lord Stark's solar. Jon had not eaten since breakfast, and he bolted down 2 cod cakes, made from the wagon of fish sent by the Manderleys preserved in sheets of ice. Jon wiped his mouth quickly, knowing it would not do to meet his Lord Father or Lady Stark hungry or dirty. Jon entered the solar and knew immediately there was trouble. Bastards learned more quickly than highborns about danger. Catelyn Stark taught him about disdain and slights, and Jon wondered if her hand drove this. Lord Eard Stark's face was stern as ever, and Maester Luwin almost had a smile on his small gray face. Robb's blue eyes, though, stared down on the ground, and his chin trembled. Jon looked straight at his father, the blank expression on his face, easy to mistake for sullenness. "Jon, today is your 12th name day. In 4 years you will be a man, grown. I have spoken to Ser Rodrik and Master Luwin. We have decided that you should learn a trade." Ned Stark said, "Lord Stark, I hope to serve at Robb's side, as his bannerman or even captain of the guards to House Stark after Jory." Jon said, "Father, Jon would be a great captain. He is my match with the sword and my better at riding. I would be proud to have him serve House Stark." Robb pleaded. Robb honed his skills daily, and he was too honest to lie, although Jon thought his half-brother better at the lance. Lord Stark looked pained, and for a brief moment, Jon thought his father might change his mind. That hope faded when Lord Stark remained grim and unmoving. "Master Luwin has written to the Citadel. You will go to Oldtown and study there until you can take your vows. When you finish your chain, I will petition the Conclave to return you to the north," Ned said. "You are a bright lad, perhaps not good at memorizing kings, but you have a grasp of building and smithing. Those are links you can forge at the Citadel. You could bring that back to the North Roads, farms, watermills." Maester Luwin added eagerly. Jon knew why he could not list the 300-year reign of Targaryen kings on the Iron Throne. He was more interested in the knights, Aemon the Dragon Knight and Ser Bran Redwyne. He had admired King Daeron for his reckless courage, but only Robb aspired to the young dragon in their pretend play. "So I am to be banished from Winterfell and the North?" Jon asked. "You will begin afresh down south. There is much to see and do in Oldtown," Ned said. "At the Citadel, no one will care about your past. They will judge you on learning, and your mind, Jon, is as sharp as steel. I can teach you history, healing, herblore, and ravenry, but the maesters at Oldtown can teach 1,000 things more. You can learn how to build castles and navigate by the stars. You can delve into the secrets of steel and study warcraft," Luwin said. Jon preferred to study by tilts in the training yard than dusty books in the library. "I am Robb's equal. I could lead men in war just as well." Those thoughts were of no use. He was a bastard and no bannermen would follow him in battle. If he was older, Jon could cross the narrow sea to enlist in a free company, or go to the wall for the Night's Watch, but he was too young. Jon had no dreams of being a wandering sellsword in Essos, but only a Stark in Winterfell, standing with his brothers and sisters, and like a Stark, he would do his duty, regardless of cost. "Yes, father, I will study at the Citadel." The caravan would need 7 days to travel to White Harbor, 2 days hard riding by horse to the White Knife River, 1 day to load, and then 4 more to the port city. The merchants were to leave the next day to avoid autumn storms on the narrow sea and then take a ship south to Oldtown and Duskendale before reaching Tyrosh. In that city of merchants, there would be no trouble finding ships traveling west to Oldtown, avoiding Sunspear and Dorne. Northmen were not welcome in Dorne after Robert's rebellion. Jon had only a day before the caravan left. Lord Stark dismissed him from his duties, but he finished surveying the crenellated bulwarks of the first keep. Jory took the final parchment, marked with rows for each tower, with a look of sympathy. Jon hurried away past the curious gaze of servants and guards. He had no need for pity and no desire to encounter Catelyn Stark and witness her happiness at banishing the bastard. Jon sorted through the few things he owned besides the clothes on his back. He folded Robb's gift into a pouch. "Why do you have to leave?" Arya had snuck into his room, her dark gray eyes trying hard not to give in to tears. She threw her skinny arms around his neck. "Father believes I need a trade," Jon said, rubbing her head. "Trade? Why can't you just fight? You are better than Robb in the yard." "In the yard," Arya said, disentangling herself to look him in the face. Jon smiled. "Robb was first to 10 marks in our duel yesterday. But you beat him the 3 days before that," Arya said. "It is my mother's fault. She is driving you away." "Hush. The blame does not belong to Lady Stark. I am a bastard." Despite the favor shown by many in the castle to Sansa for her behavior, Jon knew Arya to be perceptive beyond her 7 years. It was Arya, even more than Robb, who protested Jon's treatment. "Besides, perhaps I will make a name for myself as a Maester. I will come back and deliver your babes," he joked. Arya gave him a hard whap on the arm and a dirty look. "Ew! That will never happen. I am not like Sansa, cooing over Rickon." The youngest Stark child had been born this summer, to the great joy of all his siblings, Arya included. "I have something for you," Jon told her, as he took out a package wrapped in rags from under his bed. "A present?" Arya said. "Yes, dear sister." Jon pulled off the rags and held it out to her. When he was 8, Mikken had made him a blunted blade so that he could practice outside the yard. He spent many evenings practicing thrusts and cuts when the Lord and Lady of Winterfell dined alone with their true-born children. Jon sharpened the blade with a whetstone and used a knife, needle and thread to craft a small gray scabbard, layering the inside of the leather with fur. He had long outgrown the blade, but it had been his first sword and held fond memories. Rosiera's eyes gleamed as she drew the well-oiled blade out and balanced it in his hands. "It is so light and skinny." Jon rolled his eyes. "I was 8 then, and you are only 7 now. You can practice in your room as long as father and mother do not know. Be careful, though. The edges are sharp." He mussed up her hair again. "One day I promise to forge you a true sword." Arya put down the present and hugged her favorite brother. This time she allowed her tears to flow freely. "You will come back one day to Winterfell. Oldtown is far away. My return will depend on the Citadel and father, but I will remember the North. I will return to you one day. I swear it by the old gods and the new." That night, Jon ate at the low table while Lord Stark gave the place of honor to the merchants who told tales of the Manderleys and lavish banquets at the Merman's court. Jon did not need capons, eels, and lampreys baked into pies. He was happy with a simple dish of roast chicken, the meat juices, soaked up with hard bread. He ignored the smirk that Theon threw his way as the Iron Islander regaled Robb and the younger Starks with the tale of Balon Greyjoy chopping off both hands of the Maester of Pike. Jon left dinner early. He preferred the cool air than sitting in silence while others either mocked or pitied him. Robb found him in the yard near the broken tower, bashing a straw dummy with a training sword, sweat pouring from his face. "You should take out your anger on Theon in a match and not a straw man. The dummy fights as well as Greyjoy," Jon retorted, bringing smiles to both lads. Robb handed Jon a half-full skin. "Summer wine? Won't father notice?" Jon said, despite taking a large swig. "I spoke to father. In 8 years you can forge a chain. Gluin will retire and then you can be Maester at Winterfell," Robb said. "Your lady mother would never allow that. She worries that I am Daemon Blackfyre reborn. Although I doubt Blackfyre was ever banished to the library," Jon said regretfully. "I would be 20 years of age, married, and father would listen to my words," Robb replied with a bit of heat. There were Southron heirs who were 40 years of age and still treated like children by their lord fathers, but in the North, Boys grew to men quickly. I may have to deliver your babes then, Jon said, smiling at the look of disgust on Robb's face. Rhaenyra had the same reaction, but she hit me. The two boys chuckled at the antics of their wild little sister. Will you be able to find new sparring partners at the Citadel? Many great knights have come from the Reach, Robb said. Jon shook his head. No, masters cannot use weapons. Lewin says the Citadel trains knights of the mind. Some rush their studies to learn only ravenry, medicine, and the history of kings. But I will study smithing and warcraft, how to conduct siege warfare, and the secrets of metals. I want to build roads and ships. If you go to battle, I will stand by your side no matter where the conclave sends me. You will always have a side by me, Snow. I would swear that, under the weirwood tree, we are brothers, no matter what our names. Rose said, Do you want one last tilt? No, let's just pretend to be heroes from the past, like we did in the old days, Jon said. I will be Cragen Stark. Will you be Aemon, the Dragon Knight? Robb asked. I will never be knight, but you will be Lord Stark. I want to be Brandon the Builder. Jon tapped the loose stones of the watchtower. The broken tower was 100 feet tall, and the outside walls are 80 feet high. No one can build castles like this today, like Dragonstone or Storm's End. The keeps and walls of King's Landing are nothing compared to this. Brains the Builder created those castles with the help of giants, magic, and children of the forest in the age of heroes, Robb said. Maybe we will live in a new age, and you will be Cragen Stark, reborn in the hand of a Targaryen king, Jon said. The two boys laughed and shared the wineskin, and for that night played without care. The future could wait. Winter had not come yet for House Stark. Jon Snow walked out the Seneschal's court on his way to the Quill and Tankard in Oldtown. He had presented his discoveries on how to reduce the carbon content that made steel brittle to the gathering of Archmasters. Archmaster Nemos and Gallard argued for raising the temperature of the forge to purify steel. Jon disagreed vehemently. Perhaps in rich cities like King's Landing, knights could afford such an expensive approach for arms and armor, but to use steel in the north, and for buildings, a better way was needed. Jon demonstrated the use of blowing air, scrap, and limestone to be integrated into a large kiln. How do you not have a steel link yet? Owen Fossaway asked. Archmaster Norrin looked at you like you were the Smith reborn. Jon chuckled at the praise of the rosy-cheeked acolyte. Like many in the Reach, Owen enjoyed exaggeration and was enthusiastic about using better steel to make the farms of Cider Hall and New Barrow more productive. I plan to forge my links when I turn 16, Jon said. Hey, when he is a man grown, Master Snow will exceed all of us, and quite rapidly. Olyra said gaily to the ready agreement of many of the acolytes. They walked the river road past stone bridges and cobbled streets to an island in the Honeywine. It had been a sweltering summer, but at night the city came alive with travelers from many countries, and the strong smell from lush foliage, as well as the many brothels that serviced the guild halls on the river banks. The last 3 years had passed rapidly. Jon enjoyed Oldtown, built around the high tower, the starry septa, and the Citadel. He had walked the labyrinth of alleys and crooked streets, marveling at the thieves' market and ragpicker's wind, where anything could be bought even from far away UT. Travelers from all locales came to the richest city in Westeros to trade and study, and Jon relished meeting them all. Summer islanders with feather cloaks, perfumed courtesans from Lys Tyroshi sellswards, ragtag pirates fencing loot too rich for the stepping stones. Jon spent most hours of days and nights in the libraries of the Citadel, studying machines and metals. There were students from all parts of Westeros, but the most common area of origin was the Reach. Many second and third sons came to forge a few links before returning to their families. Jon did not partake much of the carnal pleasures of the Undercity, but he had made many friends. Owen Fossaway, Alaras, Ellen Hightower, Gareth Good. They were all a few years older, but respected his thirst to learn. Master Lewin had been right. No one cared that he was a Stark or a Snow. Jon threw himself into learning as he once had into swordplay. He attended every lecture, devoured books, and worked long into the night. He combined theory and practical application, and in fields as varied as healing to metallurgy, distinguished himself through practical experiments. It was in a study of animal husbandry where he had met Owen and Gareth. He demonstrated to the entire class that planting clover next to oats and rye would attract bees, feed farm animals, and enrich the soil. When Owen successfully implemented the idea at Cider Hall, Many stewards in the Reach had come to the Citadel to ask him for advice, and to the great surprise of acolytes and masters, Jon had been happy to share without remuneration. In contrast, Jon kept the advanced work on metallurgy and warfare private. That was his promise to Robb, and that had been the basis for the experiments on steel. He had presented some findings, but there was more work to be done. He needed to test different ores from the Reach and the North. He needed to change the ratio of limestone to scrap. He had tried to use that steel in the cocking stirrup of a crossbow, and it could not withstand enough pressure. Perhaps he needed to use charcoal. That might absorb the impurities better, or perhaps some impurity was needed. Steel that was too pure might turn brittle. "Damn, we have lost you." His friend opened the door to the tavern, and several acolytes inside cheered as Jon entered. Stories of his presentation that afternoon already having spread. "What are you thinking about? The best way to melt and cut steel?" Alaraz said with a soft Dornish drawl. "Well, yes, I could use the metal in a moldboard plow, and it would distribute weight evenly." Jon lied. No one at the Citadel knew of his family at Winterfell, or research into weapons. Alaraz ordered amber wine from the Summer Isles before fixing big, soft black eyes on the northern. "The Fossaways have enough grain and apples. Why don't you celebrate with a whore?" "Don't say you are too poor. Owen owes you many gold dragons for that last harvest." Perwyn Merryweather intervened, handing the blushing Jon a large mug of smoky cider. "Oh, lighten up, Sphinx. When the lad wishes, all the maids will rush to claim his virtue. He is a pretty one, our Master Snow, and we all know Fozzos always want more apples. He brags that the cider at his hall is the best in the Reach." "And it is," Owen roared happily. "Jon, you are always welcome at Cider Hall. Unlike these ignorant fools who can't tell cider from piss water." Several of the students from the Reach took to chasing the maids and other working girls of the Quill. Alaraz shrugged and brought out an ivory Cyvasse set. Jon nodded, and they began to set up the alabaster and onyx pieces on the board. Alaraz swore on the seven that he was not a nobleman's son. Jon was certain that no child of a simple trader could afford such a valuable luxury. He knew, too, that Cyvasse was more popular in Dorne than the Summer Isles. They played 5 games that night, and Jon won the first 4. Alaraz had the same strategic flaw as most, moving the dragon into play too early to strike against the heavy pieces. Jon exposed his elephants early in the game, and the enemy dragon flew around the board, allowing Jon time to develop his cavalry and artillery. Twice, he had slain Alaraz's dragon with a trebuchet, and once with the catapult supported by a heavy horse. Jon enjoyed Cyvasse developing his pieces with tempo by counter-attacking. His style was defensive, searching for weaknesses until Alaraz would overextend and lose the dragon. In the final game, the Sphinx flung all the pieces forward into a suicidal attack, penetrating Jon's defenses. "That would not work in a real battle," Jon said ruefully. "Your king is still dead," Alaraz replied, drinking the last drop of sweet wine and ignoring the glances of the admiring serving wenches. Jon and Alaraz walked back to the Citadel, the Sphinx leaning heavily on him. Jon could smell sandalwood and golden heart on the youth's green studded brigandine jacket, as Alaraz rested long, light brown fingers on his shoulder. "I know the riddle of the Sphinx," Jon said. "And how does a northerner know that?" Alaraz said. "You claim not to be a nobleman's son," Jon said softly. "That is very true. You are a nobleman's daughter." Alaraz turned rapidly, her fingers now resting on a knife in the pouch of her dawskin breeches. She had a soft smile, but her eyes had turned cold. "How did you know?" "Master Quiberon's lecture on anatomy. The lump on your larynx is quite small, almost not visible. You are quite slim, but you are never seen without a jacket. Your fingers are soft and uncalloused. You never worked as a trader or trained with the sword. Your father took you to Dorne when you were young, and in Dorne men and women are considered equals," Jon said. "The Citadel does not allow women to study," Alaraz spat. "What will you do now?" She relaxed her right hand, although the fingers were hidden in the pouch. "Nothing. You are my friend, and I see no reason a woman cannot study as well or better than a man." Jon sat down next to a fountain. "My younger sister would rather be a warrior than be a lady. You have earned your links, more than many lordlings here. I intend to finish 7 links and surpass my father, and then I will return back to Sunspear to my sisters. They would like you." The black eyes gazed deeply into his. "Why not come with me? Run away to Dorne. Who wants to be a master in a freezing castle in the north? She asked. I swore to return to my family, my true-born sisters and brothers, Jon said softly. A pity you are not older, Arya said. Jon cocked his eyebrows. What does my age have to do with anything? Arya laughed, the giggle clearly feminine. You know nothing, Jon Snow. She took his hand in hers, and they walked back to the Citadel. As his 16th name day approached, Jon immersed himself into his studies. He was more than capable in ravenry, history, math, and astronomy. He truly excelled in warcraft, engineering, steel, and construction. Even without displaying the full extent of his knowledge, the acolytes at the Citadel considered him a true prodigy. Owen Fossaway was not the only man of the Reach who had written to his family, imploring them to find a position for the Northerner, but another field had consumed Jon in the past few months, Valyrian magic. On his last day at Winterfell, Jon asked Luwin about the fields of study at the Citadel. The Maester had been happy to show his chain and links, silver for medicine, copper for history, bronze for astronomy, black iron for ravenry. Yet Luwin spoke little about the link of Valyrian steel, or the higher mysteries. It struck Jon as exceedingly odd. The Citadel considered Maester Luwin an expert on magic, and yet the old man did not believe in its existence. Luwin claimed that trusting in magic was like dueling with a glass sword. But Jon knew different. Glass could cut in ways that even steel did not. The books on ancient Valyria spoke of dragonglass candles, and Jon knew these were the 3 black candles in the Vault of Scribes. For an acolyte to become a Maester, they had to stand vigil in the dark vault with only the 3 unlit candles. In the memory of the Citadel, no one had ever succeeded in lighting a candle, showing that even with great knowledge, some things remained impossible. But that was not the right interpretation, Jon thought. Not having done something does not prove it cannot be done. The lords of Valyria could set the dragonglass candles burning with their will alone. With a candle, they could see across vast distances, look into a man's mind, and speak with one another. Though they were half the world apart, the wizards had used fire and magic, not a forge or a quarry, to forge roads and walls of dragonstone, and built tall topless towers where dragons would nest. The Citadel claimed blood magic was long lost, and that the few glass candles remaining did not burn. Valyria had been struck down for the use of blood magic and dark arts, and their dragons were no more. Jon dreamed often of the doom of Valyria, of the sky filled with ash, smoke, and fire burning so hot that the heat could kill even a dragon. The 14 flames erupted, spewing molten rock that melted lakes while red clouds rained down dragonglass. In the cataclysms, so much was lost. The Valyrian freehold with mighty dragon lords and millions of brutalized slaves, but also much more. The secrets of Valyrian steel, the magic to bind dragons, even the ancient records of the past, all was lost in the doom. The proudest city in the world was gone in minutes, and the greatest empire extinguished in a day as the free cities and the remnants of the old empire of Des rose up to kill the dragon lords in their weakness. So much knowledge was gone in a matter of days, buried under fire and ash. Jon woke up sometimes, panicky with fear, wondering why he lived through the destruction so many nights. And this is why the book, Signs and Portents, is the most important treasure lost since the Targaryen conquest, Archmaester Marwyn concluded. Class dismissed. Jon nodded. In that book, Daenerys Targaryen, known better as Daenerys the Dreamer, wrote down her visions of the doom a dozen years before it struck. Aenir the Exile had listened to his maiden daughter, and the Targaryen conquest followed 100 years later. He waited to leave the classroom until Alares finished sketching the green obsidian candle that the Archmaester included in the lecture. What a bunch of twaddle! A handsome, cruel mouth student wearing the Highgarden colors of green and gold proclaimed, "No one asked you, Leo Tyrell," Alares said, as she placed the sketch in her duskin sack. The Targaryens lost to the Iron Throne, Blackfire and their dragons, but their most valuable possession was a book. I hope Marwyn becomes a Maester to my enemies. Tyrell japed. The Dreamer was reputed to be strong in magic. She had prophetic dreams, and her writings might contain secrets of how to make dragon glass or birthing dragons, or even a hint on the forging of Valyrian steel, or the dragonstone that can be used in castles and roads. That would be worth far more than a sword or an uncomfortable throne, Jon said. What do you know, bastard? Leo snapped. And who needs a candle to speak to other castles? We have ravens today, and good steel in the Reach. A raven can take many days to travel, to speak from one castle to another. Immediately would change the world, and if you do not know how important forging Valyrian steel would be in battle, there is little need to discuss this further, Jon said, walking off with all airs. That fool shames the Citadel with every word out of his mouth, Ulrich said. Not all acolytes are as small-minded, and Owen tells me that not all Tyrells are like that, Jon said. Shall we go to the library? Before he could do so, another acolyte rushed into the hall. Yaxling Tower wore the flaming tower of his house sigil, but the fourth son was friendly and modest. Jan, an urgent raven. He handed him parchment sealed with the Stark direwolf. Jon's eyes narrowed. The stream of letters from Arya, Robb, and his lord father had never been sealed with the direwolf sigil. Only the most important correspondence would be, and only the Stark in Winterfell had the authority to use that seal. Jon opened the letter and read it quickly, his face darkening. What is it, Jon? Alvarez asked. It is my younger brother, Bran. He has been hurt badly in a fall, Jon said. The letter was from Robb, and although terse, Jon could easily detect the air of Winterfell's worry. Bran had fallen from a tower, but Robb was unsure how it had happened, and Lord Stark was not at Winterfell. Something was clearly wrong, for if Robb did not know, neither did his parents and family. My friends, I must say goodbye for now. I will remember my years here fondly. Where are you going? Alvarez said. Winterfell, Jon said. Land ho! The captain of the Arbor Lady cried as the stone-washed buildings of White Harbor came into view. Jon took his eyes off the massive stone that split the port, Seal Rock, a fortress abandoned by the first men centuries ago, long before Aegon's conquest. He approved of the ring of scorpions and spitfires massed on the gray-green rock, although he could see few men on the rock through his spyglass. To reach Seal Rock, soldiers had to sail from the Wolf's Den, a crumbling castle that guarded the mouth of the White Knife. Even in the Greyjoy Rebellion, no Kraken had ever threatened White Harbor, preferring to strike at weaker villages in the west. His friends at the Citadel had been more than kind. On hearing of his plans, Owen, Garth, and Aline had asked for the fastest boat that could make it north. Gunthor Hightower, a knight with Aline as cousin and Owen as good brother, asked Robwyn friends for the fastest merchantman leaving for east or north. With a letter of passage from the Lord Lyton Hightower, the Arbor Lady turned north at Dorne and dropped Jon off before an extended trading trip to Braavos and the Free Cities. The Reachmen had given him gifts of wine, a harp of golden wood, and seeds of apples, peaches, grapes, and more exotic fruit to plant in the north. Alvarez presented him with an illuminated book on the Southern Kingdom with detailed accounts of several invasions, the history of Dorne's prickly dealings with the Iron Throne. Jon embraced his friends before leaving, guilty that he had given items of far less value. His most precious belongings were buried in the chest under 2 sets of clothes and the farewell presents. Jon had 7 journals, hundreds of pages of notes, observations, and drawings. He had invented many different machines. Some practical, some entirely insane. He had created odd musical instruments, mechanical puppets, pumps to move water, hot air balloons, cranks, and winches, even a way to divert rivers for irrigation, defense, and barricades. His mind was full of ideas, but at 16 years of age, he had not the time to see to the testing and completion of his designs. That might well change in the north as he covered the springs and other cast metal hidden in the folds of his clothes. As he stepped on the slick quay, Jon was greeted by 8 men wearing thick blue-green cloaks and carrying silver tridents. They came closer, and he could see the Manderly crest, a white merman with dark green hair carrying a black trident in a blue-green sea. 2 men lowered their weapons and strode forward to greet him. Jon Snow? The speaker was the fatter of the 2, but both were quite large, bald, and had absurd thick mustaches. He wondered how much ice collected on their faces in winter, and then remembered that the water of the narrow sea lessened the chill. Hi, you must be House Manderly. I have seen Lord Wyman Manderly at Winterfell, but I do not recall your names, Jon said, still holding his heavy chest in both arms. Rylus Manderly. This is my brother, Wendell Manderly. Robb Stark asked us to give you hospitality. You could dine with my father and our family in the Merman Court. The big man did not offer to shake hands. Do you have any news of my brother, Brandon? Jon asked. At that, the round moon faces of the 2 brothers softened. The second man, less fat but with a louder voice, said, No, but we saw Lady Stark a few days ago. The sharp look from Wellis quieted the younger man down. Lady Stark would not leave her injured child, unless something important arose. Jon considered pressing for more details, but decided that would take a bit of cunning and too much time. Thank you for your kind offer. I sailed immediately when I heard about the fall, and I would see my brother Bran as soon as possible. All I need is provisions and a swift horse to get to Winterfell. The look of relief on the older brother's face was clear. The Manderleys had not wanted to dine with the bastard of Winterfell. Then again, Jon had little desire for lampreys, pork pies, and the rich victuals that the large-bellied Manderleys clearly enjoyed. My Uncle Marlon has horses at Newcastle. He would be delighted to offer one to you, Wylis said. Newcastle was the seat of House Manderley, and Marlon commanded the garrison. Jon nodded. The Manderleys would be happy to see him gone from White Harbor. He would be happy to leave and return to Robb and Bran. 7 days. Jon had ridden hard and fast, and the tough little Garren had done its best to get him there in good time. It could not gallop like a war horse, but the sturdy beast was built for the north, scrawny legs always churning forward and cutting fearlessly through the chilly winds. Jon had ridden up the White Knife and then crossed west to Winterfell. He was traveling back to the castle on the same road he took to leave. It had been almost 4 years since he had departed his home for Oldtown. No, it was never his home. Catelyn Stark had seen to that, driving him away from his true-born siblings. Gods in that time, Robb would have become a much better swordsman. He was sure to lose a spar. Jon had lost any desire to become a knight. Those dreams of glory were long gone, replaced by journals and experiments. Jon had been happy in his studies and books. He did not know if he would finish his studies as a Maester, but he had become a man of science, not of swords. And he had many good friends in the south. Besides feasts dominated by boasting, drinking, and brawling, the Northmen were a grim and dour lot. The North claimed their people were more honorable than the paper knights of the south, but that wasn't true. Good and bad existed in both places, and cruel prats like Leo Tyrell could also be found in Winterfell. He would take Owen Fossway over the Euron Greyjoy any day. He loved his true-born brothers and sisters, but he had made friends with a new pack. Owen, Alan, Garth, Runin, Harlan, third and fourth sons, who could care less that he was a bastard. And he missed Dolores. She was funny and smart, as mysterious as the Sphinx, and gifted with sparkling wit and endless curiosity. Even he, a green boy at love, knew what a visit to Dorne would mean. Jon felt his mount tremble even before he heard the howl. The Garren skittered to a stop, sniffing from side to side, legs ready to bolt. Then Jon saw the beast. It was larger than any wolf he had seen before, with smoke-gray fur and yellow eyes, and nearly as tall as his waist. Jon knew that even well-rested, the small horse had no hope of escaping a hungry dire wolf. He put his right hand on a short dagger, while his left hand calmed the shuddering Garren. Jon sensed a presence to his right flank and turned. Staring at him with dark red eyes was an albino wolf with thick white hair and a bushy tail. It was smaller and leaner and nearly invisible in the snowy forest. The gray wolf growled, but the white wolf remained silent. Jon slipped off the horse and opened the chest, lifting up a hand crossbow that he had crafted. The crossbow could be pulled back by winding a steel crank. The range was short, perhaps 30 yards, but the bolt could punch a hole through plate armor with ease. The white wolf padded over so close that Jon could hear its breath. Then the beast tugged at his left hand, gently, as if it was playing a game. Jon dropped the crossbow on the ground, realizing that these were the dire wolf pups Arya described with such excitement in her last letter. He crouched to wrap both arms around the albino as the gray wolf also approached. "I will call you Ghost," Jon said to the happy snickers of both wolves. Jon arrived at the castle soon after, dismounting after he passed through the gates. Winterfell seemed smaller now, but he had been 12 when he left, and returned almost a man grown. The Grey Wolf immediately went to a strong young man with thick red-brown hair, a sword buckled to his belt, and mail and plate over dark leather. The two brothers embraced. "Gods, it is good to see you, Jon. Everything has gone to shit," Robb said. "Let me see Bran." Jon hugged his younger brother, feeling the sweat on his brow in a room crowded with Maester Lewin, a tall, hard-faced woman with shaggy brown hair. Theon Greyjoy, Robb, and Rickon, 2 armed guards wearing Stark colors, patrolled the hall. Jon went to work, listening to the chest, measuring the pulse, and feeling the bones of his back. Jon put his fingers on several pressure points in the legs, asking Bran how much he felt. The boy answered bravely, but there was little hope in the once happy face. I will never be able to walk again, Jon, or use a sword or shoot a bow, Bran sobbed. Jon finished his inspection and turned to the boy and spoke gently. You may not gain control of your legs, but we can strengthen them. You can ride, Bran. Just 2 days past, you rode on the saddle that Tyrion Lannister designed, Robb said. Yes, and I was nearly killed by wildlings. I was useless, Bran said. You don't have to be. Robb, could someone bring me my chest? Jon said. The tall, lean woman rushed out to comply, and in less than a minute was back with a wooden sea chest with bands of black iron. Jon gave the crossbow to Bran. I built this at the Citadel. Wind the crank and place the bolt in. That toy can't shoot very far, Theon snorted. Aye, it is not a longbow, but the bolt will go through a man's eye or a steel shield, and Bran is not going to be an archer. He can use this to defend himself or Winterfell, Jon said. Can I borrow this, Jon? Bran asked. It is yours, Bran. I can build another one, or I can make you one that fits your hands. Whatever you want, little brother. Now rest. You have a slight fever, Jon said. He fell in the snow when we met the wildlings, Robb said, with an angry look for Theon. Jon and Robb left the room, leaving Maester Luwin and the fierce wildling woman. The two brothers ignored Theon and went to their father's solar. Robb sat down in the chair that Jon had so often seen Lord Stark receive Bannermen. At that moment, Robb looked nothing like Ned Stark. He had the Tully looks, a stocky build, brown hair, and blue eyes. Worse, he seemed unsure, like a green boy. Jon took a seat opposite his brother. Tell me everything. Let me understand. Tyrion Lannister came here after an assassin tried to kill Bran with a Valyrian dagger. He gave a design for a saddle that our brother could use despite your refusal of salt and bread, and yet you suspect him of guilt in the attack on Bran. Why? Jon asked. It must be a Lannister. Mother found a blonde strand of hair in the tower where Bran fell. He must have seen something and been pushed, Robb said. But Tyrion isn't the only Lannister. There are many, the Queen, Dany Lannister, all the royal children. Why couldn't it be someone else? Jon asked. That's why they are going to King's Landing to find who the dagger belongs to, Robb said. Jon rubbed his knuckles on his right temple. You are missing something. The dagger was Valyrian steel with a dragon bone hilt. And yet, you also said the killer was a filthy old man that smelled of horses and looked half-starved. Robb nodded his head. Why would any of the Lannisters use such a person to kill Bran? I don't see what you mean, Robb said slowly. If the Queen wished to kill Bran, who would she use? Jon paused for a few seconds. She has many knights and guardsmen. She wouldn't rely on anyone she did not trust. Jaime Lannister is a knight and one of the best swordsmen in the Seven Kingdoms. Would he ask a non-Lannister to do his killing? And Tyrion Lannister is supposed to be the smartest of the bunch. Why would he give a dagger to kill a sleeping boy? Any thug could have killed Bran, strangled him with a pillow, or hit him with a club. You don't need Valyrian steel to kill a boy with 10 name days. They sat in silence as Robb digested Jon's words. How much gold was found on the man? Jon asked. 90 silver stags, Robb said. That makes little sense, Jon said. The Lannisters are the richest house in Westeros. If something was that important, why pay so little? The dagger must be worth many gold dragons. Who would give Valyrian steel but pay less than a gold dragon for the deed? Robb, when did the assassin come? 12 days after the king left, Rose said. Jon thought for a moment, and then beckoned his brother to a map of Westeros. In 5 days, the king's party would reach the neck. What if someone found a bandit and gave them the dagger and the stags? That man would take a week to reach Winterfell. But who? Why? Robb thought. That bastard, he yelled and then flushed before continuing his thoughts. Sorry, Jon. If someone found an assassin 5 days later, then it wouldn't be the Queen, the Kingslayer, or the Imp. They would have planned better. So who do you think it is? Jon asked. He did not know the full details of the royal visit. Joffrey, the crown prince, is a cunt. He would have an expensive dagger and he didn't even bother to visit Bran after the fall. Robb spat. Jon struggled to recall what he knew of the crown prince. Robb had told him that Joffrey looked like a girl, with his long curly hair. Isn't Joffrey only 12 years of age? Jon asked. You didn't meet the cunt, On the road to King's Landing, Joffrey got into a fight with Arya. The king killed Sansa's dire wolf, Lady, Rose said. Father needs to be warned. Jon put his hand on Robb's elbow to stop him from leaving. Robb, you can't just send a raven. He is at King's Landing. Others might be watching him or reading his messages. If they know you accuse the Crown Prince of attempted murder, he may be arrested for treason. We can't let Joffrey get away with this. He tried to have Bran killed, Robb argued. I believe you, Robb, but look at the facts. We have no proof. The assassin is dead. Your mother has the dagger. But even if it was certain that it belonged to Joffrey, he merely has to claim he lost it in the north. It is too bad that Lady Stark was not here when I came. Then she could carry our message to Father. I wish I didn't miss Tyrion Lannister as well, Jon said. Why would the imp help? He is a Lannister, Robb wondered. He helped Bran. I doubt he would approve of his nephew's plot. If we could get him on our side, that may be to our benefit. He is said to be quite clever, Jon said. We must do something, Robb said. The last Stark who accused the Crown of crimes did not fare well at King's Landing, Jon replied. The Stark children all knew the story of Uncle Brandon and Grandfather Rickard, murdered by the Mad King. Father and our sister may be in danger, and we must be careful. We cannot tell Father directly, but a raven from a bastard brother to a beloved sister may be overlooked. I will write a message to Arya and hope she understands. Thank you. I'm glad that you are back, Robb said, the lines of worry softening at the presence of his closest friend. I vowed to be by your side if you ever had need, Jon said. I would keep that promise, no matter the cost. Arya burst into the solar of the Tower of the Hand past several Stark guards. Her father was poring over letters from the Iron Bank on the borrowings of the crown. He grimaced more from the thick reams of parchment than any war injury. Father, I have a message from Jon, Aegir shouted. Don Jon? But why is he writing? Ned said as Jory and Heward walked in the room. Apologies, Lord Stark. We told the little wolf that you were busy, Jory began. Ned sighed and then smiled, knowing how difficult it was to tell Arya anything. The wolf blood of his brother and sister flowed strongly in her veins. That's no problem, Jory. I need a break from these papers anyway. Make sure there are no spies or listeners in the hall. I would speak to my younger daughter. He waited until both guards left before turning his quizzical eye on Arya. She handed over the letter. Jon is at Winterfell? Ned said with surprise and a touch of guilt. In all the turmoil of the past month, he had not found time to write to the boy. Look at his words carefully, Father, Rosia said. She pointed at the lines near the end. Beware of lady killers in the capital. He has already attacked a younger wolf. For some, that read as a jest to a maiden about her innocence. But Ned felt shame for killing Sansa's wolf. I do not understand. Father, the lady killer is Joffrey. He is the reason Lady died. Jon wrote the letter to me. The younger wolf is Bran. Jon and Robb must believe that Joffrey hired a killer for Bran. Arya said, But how would Jon know? Ned asked. He read through the letter. To a spy. The words mostly spoke of Jon's efforts to help Robb with Rickon and Bran. Jon was delighted to see again the 4-year-old Stark who missed his mother. Rickon had been a tiny babe when Jon left for Oldtown. Ned was dismayed that Catelyn had abandoned their youngest to come to King's Landing, but his wife felt compelled to investigate the dagger. I do not see how Jon could know. He has never met Joffrey, and he was not there at Bran's attack. Father, Jon is clever. He has always read more than anyone else. You must believe him. You must do something. I know the quality of Jon's mind and heart, but I cannot accuse the prince based on this. And your brothers Robb and Jon know this. That is why they send a message to you in these lines, Ned said. In his mind, he wondered what other things the 2 eldest Stark boys could not say. He had no one he could trust to go back to Winterfell and speak with Jon, and the trip there and back was too long. Even he knew enough of the Game of Thrones to know that he could not send a raven speaking clearly about these thoughts. Ned gave the letter back to Arya. He needed time to ponder how Jon had divined Joffrey's involvement. He was still thinking of that question when he received the raven that Tyrion Lannister had been captured by his lady wife. At Winterfell, Robb received the raven with dismay. Lady Stark had sent word from the Aerie, proclaiming her fortunate capture of Tyrion Lannister. Robb was more certain than ever that Jon had been right, and the circumstances of the dagger and assassin pointed the guilt to a different party. The last week had been the best since Bran's accident. Rickon had enjoyed the affections of his half-brother. The four direwolves had formed a tight pack, keeping a careful eye on Shaggy Dog's wildness and hunting together in the woods. Both Bran and Rickon had marveled over the gadgets Jon had brought back from the Citadel, a faux glass from Myr, carvings of dragons and Sphinx, puppets on strings, and a mechanical bird that could sing. Robb had been more enthused by the Arbor Gold, strong wine with a dark purple color, heady and rich on the tongue. They had watered it down, but Jon had shown Robb the custom in Highgarden to mix their wine with sugar and cinnamon spice, heated to the taste of kings and queens. When these troubles were over, he hoped for a day where he and his brother could drink without care. He stepped down to the courtyard to see Bran in a wooden chair, rolling along with his hands. Robb was diverted by the clapping of Rickon and Jon and the proud look on Master Luwin's face as Bran moved about the yard. Bran stopped in front of Robb, a big smile on his face. "What in the name of the gods is that?" Robb asked. "Is that safe?" "It is a wheelchair. These levers roll the chair forward. These two rods act as brakes to slow the chair down, and he has a belt, so that he will not fall." Jon said, "I can move by myself now. I don't need Hodor to carry me," Bran said. "You should still have Osha and Hodor watch, but that is excellent," Robb said. "I will build a ramp from your room to the courtyard, Bran," Jon said. Robb's face turned serious even as he ruffled Bran's hair, and his half-brother noticed immediately. They walked away, still smiling, to not ruin the moment for their younger brothers. Robb handed Jon the letter in Lord Stark's solar. His brother read it and sighed. Jon had no wish to point out Lady Stark's foolishness to her eldest son. He already knew their discovery in Raven had changed nothing. "The Lannisters will retaliate. The old lion will never allow his blood to be captured," Robb said. "Our sisters will be in danger. Father too," Jon said somberly. "Robert Baratheon is his best friend. Surely the king will protect his hand," Robb said. "Your impressions of the king may be the correct one. You told me he was only interested in drinking, eating, and whoring. He is not much of a king, and the Lannisters have men all around him. I have heard in Oldtown that Grandmaster Pycelle owns his appointment to Tywin when he was hand. The Lannisters pay their debts, and they will see Lady Stark's treatment of Tyrion as a huge insult," Jon said. "What can we do, Jon?" Robb pleaded. "Send him a raven begging him to take care and watch for our sisters. But King's Landing is far away, and there must be a Stark in Winterfell," Jon said. "I have something to show you." He took out journals hidden in his vest. Robb scanned through the papers with shock. He did not understand many of the scribbles and numbers, but he could see the drawings. Like any lord trained in war, Robb knew of siege machines, battering rams to knock down gates, ladders to climb over walls, crude towers to protect infantrymen and allow archers to protect attackers from above. This was far more advanced. There were many different types of catapults. Mangonels, anagers, scorpions. There were crossbows of different sizes, some truly enormous, mounted on wagons. There were trebuchets that could hurl enormous rocks like a giant sling. There was even one that appeared to operate without human power, using a complex set of winches and tread wheels to launch projectiles. Jon had even drawn a set of plans for multiple trenches to house waves of attackers in an assault on castle walls, with redoubts at the end of each line, and siege artillery positioned to concentrate fire. Robb had never seen anything like this. "How does this work?" Robb asked, pointing at the schematics of a trebuchet. "The principle of torsion has been used on catapults for centuries. This counterweight trebuchet maximizes that it has a slower rate of fire, but with enough rocks can keep bombarding a wall. Besides Dragonstone or the Wall, few keeps or castles will be able to resist. I promised you that I would be at your side in warfare," Jon said. He stood up and paced about the room. "I will need assistance, Meeken, Luwin, and others. I will need workers to bring me wood and the use of the forge, but I will start building this weaponry, or at the very least parts of it, so we can assemble the machines when we attack." "Do you think it will come to war?" Robb asked. "I hope not. I hope Father, the King, and the Lannisters will realize the consequences of violence. Anyone who asks reasonable questions should release Tyrion. But when has common sense ever prevailed on the Iron Throne? There may be blood, brother. We need to make sure the blood flows from our enemies and not us," Jon said. "I won't call our Bannermen yet, but I will alert close allies. Meeken will sharpen weapons and repair armor. Our guards will have to drill and prepare. I will tell the lords to stock supplies for the winter, and have White Harbor purchase as much grain as possible. Rozierd, the best defense is a good defense. I would make certain our borders are protected, and that Winterfell never falls, Jon said. These were lessons he had taken from Cyvasse. Winterfell has not been threatened since Torrhen Stark bent the knee to dragons. But yes, if we go south, only Bran and Rickon will be here, until Mother and our sisters return. You need to sharpen your fighting skills. 4 years of books and no spars have weakened your sword arm. And you need to look at history and the campaigns of Robert's Rebellion and the Blackfires. There is much you can study and prepare. Battles will be fought in the rivers, castles, and towns of the Riverlands. Like so many wars before, I will show you the best use of these siege engines and machines. Jon said, I hope to all the gods that we do not, but if we must, we will fight together. Robb said, clasping Jon's hand in his own. I vow that as a Stark, winter is coming, the two brothers said. Robb Stark sat tall and proud in his father's chair, dressed in furs and leathers, with a fine white velvet surcoat bearing a dire wolf badge over his heart. Lord Stark had worn the coat when he called the banners to put down the Greyjoy rebellion, and Jon thought it entirely fitting that his brother did the same to receive the Bannermen. A serious Lady Catelyn sat on his left, careful not to be seen offering too much advice or guidance to Robb. Bran Stark was given a place of honor at Robb's right hand in the wheelchair that Jon crafted. Many lords gave Bran a hard stare as if they wondered what right a cripple should be placed above them. Grey Wind sat at Robb's feet, larger than any hound with cold yellow eyes and bared teeth. Jon Snow was on the sideline, his seat giving him ample opportunity to examine the Bannermen as they passed, and an easy vantage point to see their faces while they sat. He scratched notes on a piece of parchment next to the hand-drawn diagram of where the various houses chose to sit. The greater houses in the north, the Boltons, the Karstarks, the Manderleys, and the Umbers, sat at tables closest to Robb, but Jon had wanted to see how the lords chose to array themselves and glean any intelligence from that positioning. When she returned from the Riverlands via White Harbor, Catelyn Stark's reaction to Jon was colder than ever, with pointed comments on how the bastard had run from his responsibilities at the Citadel. Jon refrained from retorting that his duty to Lord Stark and Robb trumped any promises to the Conclave and made no comments on her folly in capturing and then losing Tyrion Lannister. Determining guilt or innocence based on a test of arms was sheer lunacy. Was Jaime Lannister, or Barristan the Bold, the most virtuous man in the Seven Kingdoms? She had avoided Jon for the next 2 weeks, and not spoken to him at meals. Her true-born sons, though, loved their half-brother dearly, and even Catelyn approved grudgingly of his work for Bran. Jon built a hand crossbow, a bell pull over Bran's bed, and ramps and grooves throughout Winterfell for the wheelchair to get to the courtyard and Great Hall. Then Robb wanted Jon to sit by his side when receiving Medgar Serwyn, and all of Catelyn's fears and suspicions returned. She snapped that Lord Stark would never have let the bastard sit at the high table. In another life, her cold disdain would have bothered him more. But Jon had grown up in the 4 years at the Citadel and Oldtown. He was confident of his talents and abilities and knew his true place in life, staying by his brother's side. He motioned to Robb that this battle was not worth fighting, and let the Starks know that he would sit next to Rickon with Maester Luwin and Sir Roderick Castle. It was a better seat than he received years past. What are you writing, Jon? Rickon asked. Just some notes on our allies. Do you know all the houses in the north? Jon said. Of course I do. Rickon puffed up with pride, and the other Stark retainers smiled with encouragement. The White and Green Mermaid is House Manderley. The Flayed Man is House Bolton. The Roaring Giant with Broken Chains is House Umber. The Black Bear is House Mormont. Jon chuckled and rubbed his youngest brother's hair. Excellent. Now tell me, which sigils are missing? The young boy stood on his chair to survey the hall. There are a lot of banners here. I am not sure, Jon. The Black Lizard line of House Reed is missing. The Cranabed men don't like to leave Greywater Watch, and they plan to meet us at the Neck and a few of the mountain clans. Mostly because it is difficult to travel from there, but they will join us. The 3 brown pine cones of House Little and the 6 green thistles of House Nori have yet to arrive. But most of the North have answered the call, Rickon said. I, the Bannermen, are loyal to the Starks of Winterfell, Roderick Cassell said. Jon Snow's smile did not reach his eyes. He was not quite certain that was true. After the feast, Jon and Robb retired to their father's solar with a flask of summer wine and a pitcher of cold water. Grey Wind and Ghost stood guard in the hallway, and their brother wolves watched over the bedrooms of the younger Stark boys. "You handled yourself well, Robb," Jon said, while he poured 2 cups of water. "It is more Grey Wind than me." He ate 2 of Grey Jon Umber's fingers, and only then did the man back down, Robb said. "He was testing you, the Lords all will," Jon replied. "I'm sorry about your seat. I wanted you next to me, by my right hand." Rosiette. "Don't be. I preferred to watch from the side to see the men. Here." Jon handed Robb the piece of parchment with names and markings. "What is this?" Robb asked. "A list of the houses and how many footmen and horses they bought. You should track their numbers to see how they truly answered the call, and how well they fight in the battles to come." Jon said, "Do you believe they are holding back men, or will not take my orders in battle? I know the Umbers and the Karstarks claim that I am just a green boy marching off to war." Rosiette. "I have no reason to suspect, but you should watch them carefully, and not just the loud ones. The quiet traitors are more dangerous. Karstark and Umber may grumble and yell, but there are others who are silent. House Dustin is famous for their horses, and yet they sent no cavalry and few men, and most of those too young or too old," Jon said. "Lady Barbie Dustin still blames father for her husband's death in Robert's rebellion. I saw her speak for a long time to Rose Bolton. He is not boastful like Gabbert Glover or prickly as Rickard Karstark, but when he looked at Bran, his eyes were cold, like our brother was an animal to be weighed and slaughtered," Jon said. Robb shuddered. The relations between the Boltons and the Starks had never been good, and in the Age of Heroes, a Lord Bolton had worn as a cloak the flayed skin of an unfortunate Stark. He is not one to cross, but the Boltons have bought many men and horses. He fought at father's side twice, against the Targaryens, and at Pike against the Greyjoys. But you are not father, Robb. These men may owe their lives to Ned Stark, but not to Robb Stark. Father says loyalty is forged with blood. They have not bled for you, and they may say sweet words to your face, but stab you in the back when you are weak," Jon said. Robb laughed as he drank down his water. "You have become a master of whispers in the south. You are far more wary than before. You would not be the first heir betrayed by their bannermen. Look at the Targaryens. Tywin Lannister was Hand of the King for 20 years. He sacked King's Landing and, as son, killed Aerys," Jon said. "Aye, you are right. War can change men, and not always for the better," Robb said. "Where will you be? Will you ride by my side? Forget what my lady mother says. I would give you an important command in the army." "Let me tend my machines first. I have trained a few dozen boys from Wintertown on how to use the catapult and ballista. I would direct them against the Lannister cavalry. Do not give me a command until your men know I am worthy of one." Jon said, "You are more than worthy of leading men, brother," Robb said. "You know that, but your men do not. They whisper already that you are not ready for overall military command. You will prove that on the field, and so will I," Jon said. Robb nodded his fervent agreement. Jon took out a simple wooden Cyvasse set that he purchased on the docks of Oldtown. Lyanna scoffed at the quality, but he had told her a northern bastard could not afford fancy toys. She said haughtily that he should have been born a sand, but then smiled to take away the sting. Robb poured out the summer wine into their cups of water. He had picked up the game quickly, but Jon could beat him even with a light cavalry handicap. Robb had a natural gift for tactics, forks, pins, and sacrificing pieces on the board to threaten the king. He was poor at strategy and long-term vision. Jon knew he would help his brother improve there. Jon spent much of the next 2 days with his brothers Bran and Rickon and their wolves, Summer and Shaggy Dog. Robb had little time for his younger brothers, and Lady Stark was in great demand, with various houses working to shore up support for the march south. Several vassals voiced concerns and conflicts that they hoped the Starks could help resolve. Robb had no desire to intervene between lords, and claimed rightly that any lasting decision had to be made by Ned Stark, so his mother listened to their complaints. Jon thought it rather odd that Lady Stark had began this conflict over Bran, and yet spent little time with the boy, leaving him to Maester Luwin and Ser Roderick. But even those two were busy with managing the household. O'Shea, the wildling, and gentle Hodor took care of the children, and the two odd and very tall companions stood near as Jon wrapped the thick ropes around the metal windlass of the trebuchet. A few boys from the town, too low born to be accepted as squires, also watched as Jon built the machines that they would use in war. "Aren't they too little to pull back the lever?" Rickon asked. It was a question that many in the room wanted to ask. "This is a counterweight trebuchet. See that large box in the middle?" Jon pointed, while the boys nodded. "It is full of stones and sand. The long lever is pulled and thrown by that weight, not your arms. All the lads have to do is load a 20-pound rock in the sling when it comes down." "And you think this can be used in war?" Bran asked. "Aye, these are small trebuchets. If you load them correctly, they can fire 2 rounds a minute. The rock can go hundreds of yards and kill a horse easily," Jon said. "It is not chivalrous to attack an animal," Bran said. Jon shrugged. "It is war, Bran. Better to kill them than let them kill us. The faster they die, the quicker father and our sisters can return home." "Do you have to go, Jon? Why can't you stay here?" Rickon asked. Shaggy dogs snarled loudly, spooking several horses who had cantered over to drink from a trough. Ghost nudged his wild brother, and the black wolf calmed down under the stare of the white wolf. "Ah, little brother, someone needs to tell Robb when the battle begins. Otherwise he will spend all his time feasting with lords and fighting off marriage proposals." The two Starks and Snow laughed. Everyone at Winterfell knew that both Rickard Karstark and Wylis Manderly had offered their daughters respectively. Robb had been more flummoxed than dealing with the Great Jon. The Jon had advised the heir of Winterfell to take both maidenheads, which showed how Iron Islanders followed their cock over their brain. Jon finished the last adjustments on the trebuchet. He turned to the other boys in the room. "Chet, Cleidos, Shane, and Denise, practice loading and firing the machine this afternoon. I will send out meat and bread from the kitchen." Jon and his brothers went to find Robb. Robb was in the training yard, sparring with his men. The Niagara Joy looked on, boasting to everyone that he had taught Robb everything about sword fighting. Jon doubted that was true. Robb was good with the blade while Theon preferred the bow. An entire battalion of Karstarks, fully armored and armed, ringed the courtyard. Other houses watched, but the Karstark men, with their tall oaken shields and long spears pointed at the sky, dominated the audience. Robb and 2 big bearded men, wielding battle axes and wearing the white sunburst on black, had beaten a hornwood and a lock, but could not penetrate the defense of their final opponent, a quick warrior with an iron helmet and giant-studded mace. "Enough! You all have fought well this morning, my lords," Robb said, pausing the combat. "And lady," the warrior took off the helmet, revealing a lanky woman with jet-black hair and dark eyes. A few she-bears cheered, and Jon was sure that this was the heir to Bear Island. She was not as large as small Jon Umber, but still taller than Robb or Jon. Robb recognized his brothers and motioned them over. "Jon, these men will ride with me as my honor guard. This is Torrin and Eddard Karstark. We were fighting Darren Hornwood and Donna Locke, and this is Dacy Mormont. Pleased to meet you all, Jon Snow," he said. "You are the master," Darren Hornwood said. He was a jovial lad, smiling despite his loss. "Do you spar at Oldtown?" "Only an acolyte. You have to forge your chain and take vows to become a Maester, and no sparring. We are taught that our mind is the best weapons." "No swords? Did they cut off your cockatoo at the Citadel?" Tian hooted. Jon stayed calm, but Robb flushed red. "Greyjoy, Jon was better at you with a blade when he was 12. Robb snarked. "I would like a spar, Maester Snow," one of the Karstark boys said. He was a younger version of his father, tall and broad-shouldered, with hair loose past his shoulders. 2 long raids fell down in front of his ears to a metal neck guard, and he clutched the long axe tightly with both hands. The yard quieted as the nobles looked to Robb. Jon knew Robb could not refuse the challenge without losing prestige. He wondered if Lord Karstark had planned this, to proclaim that Robb was a green boy, with a cripple and a weakling, for his brothers, while his 2 sisters were prisoners at King's Landing. The North preferred swords and spears, not books, Jon thought. Then again, they had not seen what a trebuchet could do to castle walls. "I accept, Karstark." Eddard Karstark nodded, and Jon took a blunted blade from a rack. He jabbed once and twice for balance and to feel the weight. "Jon, don't you want any armor?" Robb asked. Eddard wore boiled leather with large metal plates over his shoulders and chest. Jon noted that Karstark had little protection on his arms. "No, I won't need it to win," Jon said to the snorts of several of the Karstark men. He planned to use quickness and had no desire to match blows with his broad-shouldered foe. Rickard Karstark and Rose Bolton had joined the crowd, as had both Umbers and the Glovers. The courtyard was filled with lords and knights, and many eyes stared hard at Jon, wondering how a Maester would handle a blade. Jon raised the sword to Eddard, keeping his left leg behind so that he offered the smallest target to the battle axe. Karstark swung with all the might of his arms, and Jon merely backed up, the axe whistling through the air. Glanced around on the balls of his feet, sidestepping to the left and right, and the sword barely moved, and even then the least energy possible was used to deflect the axe blows. The attack and defense continued for several minutes, with Karstark increasingly annoyed and taking heavier and wider swings. Jon was certain he could nick his opponent easily in both elbows and upper arms or slash the right thigh, but he decided to end it quickly without bloodshed. He slowed down, and Karstark unleashed a mighty blow from his right. Jon stepped forward, using the blade to turn the momentum of the axe down toward the hard-packed earth. His right foot was past Eddard and the axe buried in the ground. When Jon turned to his foe's exposed side, he stamped viciously on the back of the right leg, and as Eddard stumbled onto his knees, Jon slammed the pommel into the back of the neck, knocking him to the floor. He then ran the blade over the back in a motion that would have exposed heart and lungs in a real fight. The yard was stunned, except for loud cheering from Bran and Rickon. Robb chuckled first, and then several Bannermen applauded, even if the Karstark soldiers did not. Jon held out his hand and pulled Eddard up, although the axe remained on the ground. "Thank you for the spar," Jon said. Harrion and Torrin came over to check on their groggy brother, with their father standing aloof. "You swing too hard." Eddard's sense were returning. "What do you mean?" Jon picked up the axe and handed it back to him. "You are strong enough that if it hit, the axe would slice through anything but the toughest plate. You don't need to swing so much. With a smaller motion, you could recover and defend better. When you lose balance, your arms and legs are exposed. You would fight better if you fought easier," Jon said. Eddard placed the axe on his belt and then stood up to shake Jon's hand, his admiration clear to anyone nearby. "You may be right, Snow. I would like to fight by your side." "We will when we face the Lannisters," Jon said. "Where did you learn that? Is that how knights in the South fight?" Rickon asked. "I am no knight. I have to use these tricks to keep up with your brother Robb. He is a great swordsman, far better than Theon," Jon said, smirking. "You will have to show me that move, Snow," Robb said. "Now let's have food and drink." Jon mopped up the remains of venison, turnip, and barley stew with warm oat bread. It would not be considered much of a meal in the Reach, but the food was rich and hearty, and washed down with weak ale satisfied his simple tastes. Robb ate with his honor guard, and Jon saw pork pies, roast pig, turnips, smothered in butter and wine at the high table. Winterfell had invited him to join them, but he had declined, saying that seat of honor was for Robb's protectors, and he was happy to dine with his brothers Bran and Rickon. The younger Manderly apologized again for not hosting a dinner in White Harbor, but Jon said he was grateful for the sturdy horse, and accepted an invitation to revisit the Mermaid's Court after the war. As they ate, Jon told stories of Oldtown to Rickon and Bran, cobbled streets that turned into small islands connected by stone bridges, bustling with travelers from faraway places, Essos, the Summer Isles, and even more exotic locale. Oldtown was second in size only to King's Landing, and there had been settlements on the Honeywine as soon as the first men had settled Westeros 10,000 years ago. He hoped one day to return there, perhaps with Robb, Arya, and their younger brothers, and introduce them to the Reach. Bran would enjoy the library at the Citadel, and Rickon would wonder at the Starry Septon, the High Tower. Sansa would be queen and would visit the Citadel with knights and guards, not a bastard. Jon remembered fondly his last dinner in Oldtown, where Owen and Alair's bickered playfully over the quality of food in the South. Alair's ordered dishes from Dorne's spicy red and green peppers stuffed with cheese and onions, and flatbread with chickpea paste, mesquite honey, and salty olives. Owen and Alair's countered with victuals from their homeland, decadent in fruit and spices. Owen unveiled his favorite dishes from Cider Hall, spiced brawn, meat jelly from the head of a pig, and a sauce of garlic, apples, 3 different types, and cloves, a spinach, plum, and apple salad, and a cheese plate, good enough for the Queen of Thorns. Allures japed that food from the Reach was like the people, bland, fatty, and plain, while Dornish cuisine was dainty, spicy, and intriguing. Owen trumped that argument with bottles of Arbor Gold, Much better, he claimed, than sour Dornish wine. Alluras retorted that he had clearly never been to Sunspear. Snow! The call came from the middle of the girls, a lass perhaps 10 and 8, wearing furs over ringmail and carrying a mace like her older and younger sister. She was short, chunky, and strong, unlike the tall sister Daisy, and Jon remembered the last meeting with Jorel Mormont a few weeks before his 12th name day. He had disarmed her in a spar, and she had been both impressed and glad her family had not witnessed her easy defeat. "Jogri, these must be your sisters?" Jon said. They had the Mormont look, dark hair, stern gaze, sturdy arms and legs, hands calloused from hours with the mace and sword, ready to fight Ironborn or Wildling. The youngest was Bran's age, but she carried a short sword. "This is Lyra and Lyanna." Mormonts did not curtsy. Jory sat down opposite Jon. Her sisters took places on both sides. "So is it true what the Greyjoy say?" "Greyjoy says a great deal, mostly to impress scholarly." "Wenches, what exactly are you referring to?" Jon replied. Lyanna had japed about bagging and bedding all the Mormont sisters, even 10-year-old Lyanna, until Daisy threatened to cut his balls off with a dull knife. He poured some watered-down ale for the 3 sisters. "He says you don't know how to use your cock." "I told him I could prove him wrong," Geralo said, leaning her heavy teats forward. Jon blushed slightly. "Greyjoy sticks his cock into anything that moves. The Citadel is full of men. That sort of thing might interest Iron Islanders on their boats." "Sounds just as bad as the Night's Watch," Lyra cracked. "I enjoyed the Citadel. There are people from over the world, and the library has so many books that no man can hope to read them all," Jon said. "Jon, you don't need to become a maester," Jory said. "Come to Bear Island. My lady mother would welcome you there." "I don't want to impose," Jon said. Jory stared at him with fierce brown eyes. "For such a smart boy, you can be really stupid. The she-bear would be proud to have you join our family with her daughters. My mother says that any son of Ned Stark would be a good one, and you are the prettiest and the most learned. Could you not make Bear Island your home?" When he needed to clear his mind from thoughts on steel, Jon sketched ideas that he would implement if he was the Lord of Winterfell or Brandon the Builder reborn. He would build long ships on Bear Island from the tall pine and oak trees to control the Bay of Ice, and sent those southwards to House Flint to defend against Pike and trade with Lannisport and Oldtown. He would ship the timber on rivers down to the neck and port them to White Harbor. He read a scroll of the first men that spoke of a tree that thrived in weirwood forests and produced warm and sweet juice. He could plant those trees in Bear Island and sell the sap in the south. "Jon Snow, what are you thinking?" Jory said. "It is a kind offer. But my first duty is to Robb. While I can help him, I will. I promise to come to Bear Island someday." Jon said. "You would be welcomed by us," Lyra said, her strong calloused hand stroking his wrist. "Many of us, not just Jory. Mother speaks well of you to all her daughters." "Aye, Snow." Jorla jabbed her finger at his chest and gave a crooked smile. "Stop living with your head up your arse and your cock in a book. Now tell us about these weapons you craft. They say you have dozens of younglings manning these things." Jon took the Mormont girls out to inspect the catapults and scorpions. They understood the ballista easiest. After all, it was just a large crossbow. Jon kept the trebuchets hidden. Those siege machines would be a surprise, nasty for the Lannisters and pleasant for the Starks. Jon was glad the final feast of Winterfell was tonight, and they would march in the morning. There had been too much drinking, boasting, and brawling. A Bolton man had pulled out a knife and threatened to flay a Hornwood knight. Roose Bolton intervened, and his cold eyes froze the other retainers. But the lone Bolton man slowly backed down, the strange broad grin not leaving his face. Jon wondered whether the man was a fool or mad with bloodlust. Even Lord Eddard Stark had been careful around Roose Bolton. Jon had hoped for some quiet time with Bran and Rickon, but the loud hall was a poor setting for that wish. Major Mormont had brought her brood over to thank Jon for showing them the siege weapons. The Manderleys complimented the roast elk in oil and mustard, and the mutton chops sauced with southern spices and honey. Wendell and Wylis certainly ate enough of both dishes, Jon thought, although the feasts at White Harbor were likely more lavish. Lord Cerwyn promised to send his heir Clee to visit Bran at Winterfell and serve the Starks. Jaime was 2 years older than Bran, but Jon was happy that his young brothers would have male company close to their age. Jon left dinner with the loud boasts of Rickard Karstark, Theon Greyjoy and Robert Glover still ringing in the hall to put Rickon and Bran to sleep. He told Rickon a story of the Targaryen queen's visit to Winterfell in the time of Alaric Stark and hugged a lonely Bran, promising that he would return and bring their sisters back. The pack would reunite one day, and Jon knew that Ghost and Grey Wind promised Summer and Shaggy Dog the same. Jon saw the light in the solar and went to find his brother. Robb sat in Ned Stark's chair, a half-burnt candle illuminating his red-brown hair as he gazed over a detailed map of the Riverlands. Jon used every shred of information in the scrolls and books at Winterfell to draw the hills and forests and give a sense of the topology of the river and the land. His brother motioned to a chair, and Jon noted that Robb drank cold water as somber blue eyes lifted from the mat. "You look worried," Jon said, as he sat down. "I spoke to Mother. She received a raven from River Run. Tywin Lannister unleashed his men on the Riverlands. We will have to battle them long before we get close to King's Landing." "What if they hurt our sisters and father when we march?" Robb said. "Then they are fools. Father is their most valuable prisoner. You are his heir. If they should kill him, you become Lord Stark with an army, and it would be Robert's rebellion again. We would get revenge, and another would sit on the Iron Throne," Jon said. "You didn't meet Joffrey. The boy is cruel and callous. He ordered Aryer's friend, a butcher boy, killed by the Hound and Sansa's wolf executed. He may mistreat his prisoners," Robb said. "Killing the Warden of the North would prolong any war. The Lannisters must know that, whatever the outcome in battle, if Father is alive, a settlement can be negotiated. The Mad King killed both Lord Stark and his heir, and everyone knows what happened next. Had Arya's imprisoned Rickard and Brandon, we would still bow to dragons. Only a fool doesn't know that Arya and Sansa are far less valuable than Lord Stark to our Bannermen, and that the North would be honor-bound to revenge their liege lord's death," Jon said. "I want all of them back. They belong to the North, not in that shithole of King's Landing." "I agree. We love our sisters, but not every lord sees a girl as that precious. Even Father treated Sansa as a prize to be married off," Jon said. "Sons had always been valued more in the succession, since the Dance of the Dragons. What is truly on your mind, Robb?" "Gods, we are so young. Are we really ready to fight a war?" Robb said. He looked far more hesitant than when he faced his bannermen. "Robert Baratheon and Father called their banners when they were but 19 years of age," Jon said. 19 is not 16. We should be training in the yard, learning how to be lords and considering betrothals," Robb said sourly. Jon thought his brother presumed a great deal that Father would train a bastard to be a lord or find a wife. "I heard Wylis Manderly is pushing his eldest on you," he said, with a sly smile. Robb's hearty laugh brightened the room. "You should marry the younger Manderly girl, Wella. Then we would be brother and good brother," Robb quipped. "Unless you intend to find a blushing Southron maiden. I am sure the Lamesters or the Tyrells will be eager to keep me warm and happy, or perhaps I will find a spicy Dornish woman or two." Jon jested before taking on a more serious note. "Robb, you did the right thing to call the banners. The Iron Throne will only listen to force, and after a few victories, they will be forced to agree to terms. We are young, but this is the only choice we have. Wolves do not bow to lions." "You are right, Jon. Thank you for being here and marching with me. And for taking care of Bran and Rickon." "Rickon is very pleased with the crossbow you gave him," Robb said. That hand crossbow looked like a simple toy, but Jon tested it out on archery butts. At 20 feet, the bolt could pierce half a foot of earth, enough for the eye of a wilding or ironborn. "I will miss both Bran and Rickon. I want to beat the Lannisters and then return north with Father and our sisters. Rickon and Bran deserve that too," Jon said. "I agree. Snow, we march tomorrow." "Aye, Stark. We both need rest for the battles to come," Jon said. Jon rode the sturdy little Garen down the King's Road in the center of the Northern Army. He kept watch over the catapults, trebuchets, and other siege machines pulled in several wagons and his special supplies. Saws, hammers, ropes, block and tackles, nails, adzes, and large 9-inch nails. Each boy trained for the artillery had responsibility for certain tools, and Jon received reports daily on the equipment. The wagons also carried steel gears, hooks and pulleys, and a large load of ironwood, strong and hard but also quite light. Robb had made excellent time, and the army had reached the neck in 5 days. Jon dismounted and prepared for nightfall. With Ghost by his side, he spoke to the boys in each wagon, making certain from their leaders that there was ample food and drink. After he finished, Jon fed and watered the garron and proceeded to walk about the camp. Ghost caught the scent of his littermate Grey Wind, and the 2 direwolves had gone off to hunt. Years ago, before the Citadel, Jon occasionally envied the attention paid to Robb as heir to Winterfell. On this march, though, he was happy to be a Snow and not a Stark. Every minute, Robb was surrounded by nobles and lords who wanted his time. The Umbers demanded to march before the Glovers. The Glovers asked for funds from Winterfell to build ships to repel the Ironborn. The Karstarks, or at least Lord Rickard Karstark, sneered at everyone, claiming preeminence through their blood ties with the Starks, a great irritant to the Manderly brothers. Jon thought Robb managed the army well, handling the many lords and heirs. 12,000 men and 3,000 cavalry had ridden down from Winterfell. Another 4,000 had joined during the march. Flints, the mountain clans, and men from White Harbor and Deepwood Motte. Every morning and evening, Robb had ridden with a different lord, giving an ear to concerns and asking about their family and men. Robb's battle guard was large and growing, and he made sure to recognize each member, regardless of future inheritance or the power of their house. A few, like Daeron Hornwood and Dacy Mormont, would become lords, while some, like the Karstarks and Owen Norrie, were second and third sons. The Northern Army was 16,000 large, with much of the strength concentrated in a few great houses. The Karstarks provided 2,300 men, and the Manderlys 1,500. The Umbers and Boltons sent 2,000 each, although Jon noted that the Boltons had far fewer horse than expected. The first 3 houses were loud in their demands for Robb's attention, but it was the last one, the flayed man of House Bolton, whose silence bothered Jon more. The Bolton men were as hard and aggressive as any Umber or Karstark, but a silent Rose Bolton controlled them with a silent but iron fist, and Jon found that more disturbing than arrogance or boasts. Jon enjoyed his time with the Mormonts and the Foresters. The Mormonts were brave but poor, their home of Bear Island suffering from wildling raids, ironborn, and a lack of trade. Maekag, Mormont, a short-tempered, proud, and willful lady, had brought 3 daughters south, Dacy, Lyra, and Joralel, and they were all tough and could wield a spiked mace better than any man. If he had a working forge, Jon would have offered to craft stronger armor for the she-bears, as he admired their fierce strength. The Foresters were rich but few, as they controlled the largest source of ironwood in the north. Ethan Forrester, the 3rd son, had been curious about the siege engines and sought him out to ask questions of the Citadel. Jon was happy to answer them for one day. When Robb was Lord of Winterfell, he planned to visit the forests and experiment with uses of ironwood material in water and windmills. Snow. Several members of the Honor Guard had come to visit the center of the caravan, including Dacy Mormont to see her sisters, and Daeron Hornwood with Eddard and Torrhen Karstark to accompany Dacy. Jon had heard rumors that Hornwood was betrothed to Alice Karstark, but the future lord clearly had eyes for the tall and comely Dacy, to the chagrin of the Karstark brothers. Then again, Lord Rickard made it clear that he would be happy to replace Daeron with Robb for Alice's hand, if the heir to Winterfell indicated any interest. "Not riding with Robb?" Jon asked the crowd. "The Theon Greyjoy keeps bragging about his manhood," Dacy said, rolling her eyes. "He says he slept with 3 wenches the night before we marched." "How does one man satisfy 3 women?" Eddard Karstark wondered, receiving a quick clout on the head from his older brother. Jon had no idea. He was a maiden still, and he had no wish to father a bastard. He whittled a wooden winch with his knife. "What are you doing?" Eddard Karstark asked. "The winch can be used for a pulley," Jon continued, despite the confusion in their faces. "A pulley can pull things of great weight, like heavy logs of wood or giant stones." "Is it for your war machines?" Hornwood asked. Jon nodded, although in truth, the winch could be used for many things. "My sisters say you have not fired the catapults since Winterfell. Do you not need to test them?" Dacy asked. "No, I already know what they can do, and my men have trained, and there may be spies in our camp," Jon said. "I asked my father why he didn't fight in tournaments. Lord Stark said that when he fights a man for real, he wants his enemy to not know what he can do. The Lannisters will not expect these weapons. They will pay for their crimes against the North. We will see how well their cavalry hold against artillery." A day and a half later, the Northern Army had reached the Trident. That river was the heart of the Riverlands, and they were at the Green Fork. The trident was not wide at that point, but the river ran high and fast at the crossing. The first battles of the war went poorly for the Riverlords. Jaime Lannister broke Lord Vance and Lord Piper at the Golden Tooth. Advancing to River Run, Sir Edmure Tully had been taken hostage, but Piper and Blackwood led survivors back to the Tully castle, forcing a siege. Gregor Clegane's forces had joined with Tywin Lannister after wiping out Sir Beric Dondarrion, and that army was pillaging and burning the land. Robb's force reached the Twins in the late afternoon. The stronghold consisted of 2 identical castles with high walls, a deep moat, and a barbican and portcullis on both sides. The stone bridge was less than 500 feet long and wide enough for 4 war horses to ride abreast, or 2 large wagons. The Freys could dig channels, making each castle an island, and the bridge was guarded by a strong tower with arrow slits and murder holes, and portcullises for defense. Anyone who controlled that central tower could rain death onto the bridge. The Twins lied directly in the path from Winterfell to River Run. The ancestors to the Frey family had chosen this point, the narrowest of the Trident, and constructed the only bridge for hundreds of miles on each side. It was an astute decision, Jon thought, as he examined the lush forests nearby. The lords were summoned, and Jon walked over with May G. Mormont and Roderick Forrester to the command tent. A small group of knights with 2 blue towers and a bridge as a sigil stood outside. Lady Stark's face was sour, and Jon was thankful he was not to blame for her mood. Robb was stone-faced, but the anger of the Great Jon and Lord Karstark were obvious to all. "Lord Frey refuses us passage," Catelyn Stark said. "He claims he does not wish to anger the Iron Throne, and that Tywin Lannister has a long memory. His liege lord is besieged at River Run. He has sworn oaths to Hoster Tully," Robb said. "The word of a Frey is about as worthless as one of their knights in battle." The Great Jon said to agreement of many northern lords, "Do you think he means to betray us to the Lannisters?" A nervous Robert Glover asked. "Walder Frey is cunning, but cautious. He will wait and wait until he is forced. He wants the greatest reward with the least risk," Lady Stark said. "We need to cross the Trident," Robb said. "There are 2 Lannister armies. If we cannot cross, our allies will be crushed by one, while we must fight the other. We should attack the Twins. We have 4 times as many troops as they," Jon said. Jon thought of the incredible stupidity of that comment. With the bridge as a source of supplies and reinforcements, the castles were difficult to besiege. Whoever controlled the water tower ruled the bridge, and the Freys had seen the northern host from miles away. The fortresses would be well stocked with men and food. Jon's lack of skill as a military strategist was only matched by his preoccupation with his cock. Fortunately, Robb had better sense. "No, a siege would cost us many months. River Run can hold out for 1 or 2 moons, but not that long. Mother, you will need to treat with Lord Frey," Robb said, the disgust clear in his voice. "Walder Frey will extract a heavy price, my lady," Rickard Karstark added. "He's as greedy as he is lusty. The man is 90 years old and bedded his 8th wife last year." Jon left the meeting deep in thought. He had an idea, but before he spoke to Robb, he needed to find a few answers. With Ghost and Grey Wind watching, he cut a long, thin pole from a dead oak tree and then stripped the branches. He marked off 1-foot increments on the pole and undressed to jump into the river. The current was quick, but Jon was a strong swimmer and stayed close to the western bank. He jabbed the pole deep into the riverbed and then swam for the shore, his right hand steady. 8 feet deep, less than he expected. When he emerged cold and wet, he saw the lush forest of trees, oak, pine, and hawthorn, a great deal of wood, a shallow river, a narrow crossing. He could work with this. Jon would need to speak to the Manderleys and the Chronogamen tonight, and then burn a midnight candle. He had diagrams to draw and distances to measure. The next morning, he walked to Robb's tent. His brother had awoken with the sun, and a few northern boys carried pails of water and food for both men and horses. All around them, the honor guard started to rise, although Jon noted that Quent and Shad, longtime Stark men, were wide awake, patrolling the tent. Jon had bought the 2 Manderley brothers and a cousin. He needed Wallace and Wendell to speak, but it was the opinion of Mataran Manderley, whose father was harbor master and castellan of Seal Rock, who mattered. A few Crannog men came too. Arslan Pete and Ebert Boggs. Jon's entrance during breakfast went unnoticed for a minute. "Still no word from your lady mother?" Robert Glover asked. Lord Frey declined to see her last night. The longer he delays, the higher the toll. He believes us desperate. Robb said and then smiled at seeing his brother. Jon, care to join for us for bacon and bread? Greywind playfully licked Ghost Snow. Robb, I have a thought. But first, I wanted you to hear something from the Manderleys, Jon said. Witness Manderley stepped forward, clasping fat, meaty hands in front of an impressive belly. The heir to White Knife was not boisterous like his father, but his formal dignity quieted the crowd. Lord Stark, your brother has asked us a question on our naval knowledge. The best person would be my cousin, Maturin Manderley. Another large, round-faced man stepped forward. Sir Snow, any ship with a capable crew could hold such a machine in place. We can even use a flat barge or fisherman boat, and use anchors and oars to do so. Maturin said. Jon expected the answer, and didn't have time to correct his title. What machine, Jon? Robb said. Jon took out a piece of parchment, and the men gathered about. There was a drawing of a structure built from 4 long poles in a pyramid with a sturdy wooden base. Steps were cut on 2 poles on opposite sides, and there was one last pole in a face of the pyramid, where a large wooden crate rested, tied to a long rope with several pulleys attached. That rope finished in a steel capstan, a horizontal crank, large enough for 4 strong men to turn. What is that, Jon? Robb asked again. This is a crane, and the Manderleys say that we can use it on any riverboat. The crate will hold timber pilings lashed together by rope. This crane will drive the pilings into the river floor. It can make a foundation, Robb, Jon said. A foundation for what? Robb asked. A bridge. I can build you a bridge across the Trident, Jon said to many incredulous faces in the tent. Before Robb could fully take in his bastard brother's words, Lady Stark returned, flanked by several weasel-like Freys. She calmed herself before asking Ser Steffron, a gray-eyed man with balding gray hair tied in a topknot, to stay outside. Lady Stark began immediately, once the tent flaps were closed. Lord Walder Frey has named his price. He wishes Robb to marry one of his daughters. Arya to be betrothed to another. 2 Freys to be taken as squires. 2 other Freys will be fostered at Winterfell, and he expects Lord Stark to help make marriage alliances for other Frey knights. Lady Stark's bitter expression was mild compared to the outrage on the honor guard. 2 marriages, squires and wards. Why doesn't he ask for a dragon egg and a gold mine as well? Darren Hornwood japed. How many swords and horse? Robb asked. 4,000 men, of which 20,000 are knights, Lady Stark said. Frey knights, cunts who can barely hold a sword the right way. They fight like blind and crippled bears. No offense. Lady Mormonts, Umber hastened to tell Daisy and her mother that she-bear had joined several lords in the tent when Lady Stark returned. None taken, Sma John. 1 green Mormont boy is worth 10 Freys. Maggie Mormont said, You need the passage, Robb. Walder Frey knows that, Lady Stark said. The mood in the tent had turned sour, and Jon decided to speak up for his brother. Robb is worth more than this. He is the heir to Winterfell, and the son of one of the greatest lords of the realm, he said. And what does a bastard know about making marriage alliances? Catelyn responded. Jon did not flinch. I know this. House Hightower has 15,000 swords and the wealth of Oldtown. House Tyrley has 10,000 swords and a skilled commander. House Frey has Walder Frey, his get, and a bridge. One day, Robb will be Lord Stark. The Starks have ruled the North for 8,000 years. His hand in marriage is a valuable prize, and not to be wasted. Jon said before addressing Robb directly, Lord Stark, I can get the army across the Trident. Tell me more. What will you need? Jon, Robb asked. Thousands of strong men who will work hard. We need to cut and saw a great deal of timber and lash them together as poles. The Crandiged, they will build rafts to ferry men across to defend the other side. Give me 8 days and I will give you the crossing. Jon said, I do not see how that is possible. The cold voice of Rose Bolton filled the room. The water is fast and the rush of the Trident can blow poles away. Not only men need to cross, but horses, wagons, and all of our supplies. Lord Frey will only increase the price if he sees us desperate. Riverrun is besieged, Robb. We need to relieve my father. Lady Stark said. Robb held up his hand for silence and thought for a minute. Do you think the Freys will attack as we are building? Lord Karstark stood in the corner with his 3 sons. It took the Freys 50 years to build the bridge in stone. They will think us fools if we try to build it in war. Robb looked at Jon's unflinching eyes and nodded. Riverrun is under siege, but it won't fall quickly. The Blackfish is not so easy to defeat. It will hold for many months. The Rivermen have already been pushed back into their castles, so nothing will change in a week. The Lannisters will think us stuck at the crossing. They might be easier to ambush then, my lord. I trust my brother Jon. He is a man of his word. If he says it can be done, what more can I do? Allow me to address the men in the camp. I will explain what I need. My boys cannot do this alone, but with the help of your lords, I can. Jon said. Catelyn Stark tried to whisper into her son's ear. You cannot allow the bastard to do this. Robb gave her a cold stare and walked away. Lord Amber, Lord Karstark, Lord Bolton, send messengers to gather the men. Our captains and knights and heads of house will assemble in 15 minutes. Lady Stark, send the Freys away. Tell them we will consider their offer, Robb said. The leaders of the army gathered near the riverbank, where 3 wagons sat, with much metal machinery and hornwood on blankets of leather and skin. Cheddin and Dees were unloading saws and adzes from another wagon, nearer the trees, but had returned, leaving several boys to continue preparations. Jon stood with Robb in front of hundreds of men. Thousands more, milled close, curious as to the events of the day. He had not spoken to an army before, but he had presented in front of packed halls of maesters and students. He had not been nervous then, and he would not be nervous now. As the crowd gathered, Jon worked on a sketch of the future bridge. My lords and knights, my brother Jon would speak, Robb said simply. Jon put away his drawing in a pouch and turned his eyes to the men and Mormonts. Walder Frey wishes to hold us hostage. He demands our leader's hand in marriage. My true-born sister, 2 wards at Winterfell, multiple squires, and to lord over the north. It is his duty to help his besieged sworn lord against the Lannisters, but he sits in the castle, refusing us passage. Will we allow him to extort us, to rob us, to tell us what to do? Loud snorts of no and cries of disgust rang out. What do we say to people who would steal from and cheat us? Jon expected an answer of no, but the men of the north had a more pungent response. I say fuck the Freys, Small Jon Umber roared. The chant echoed through the crowd. Fuck the Freys, fuck the Freys, fuck the Freys. Could be heard loud and clear, and for several minutes, but I will need your help. Brave men must stand guard on the other side of the trident. We will have to saw and cut timber, lash poles together, and bring the boats to the right spots on the river. I will build a crane to construct the bridge. This machine will increase lifting power tenfold. A man who can raise 50 pounds will be able to pull 500 with this crane, but for that final task, I will need the biggest, strongest, toughest men in the north. Are you with me? Jon said. Once again, Jon miscalculated. He expected an eye, but the thundering crowd surpassed his expectations. And then Small Jon rose to his feet. You need men, not little boys. Only the Umbers will do. Small Jon lifted his arms to the sky and then lowered them to flex bulging muscles. The red-headed and red-bearded Small Jon was not small, and only slightly less broad than the massive Great Jon. A fierce, rangy warrior with a black cloak patterned with white suns snorted loudly. The Karstarks are stronger than you. My brothers and I will lay down this bridge. Harry and Stark, the heir to Carfold, beckoned Torsen and Eddard to join him. The Small Jon was perhaps an inch or 2 taller, but the 3 Karstark boys were long-limbed, powerful men. The Great Jon and Lord Rickard stood aloof as their children glared, with no hint of backing down. My lords, there is a great deal of work. The crane will require many strong men, Umbers, Karstarks, and others. The work will take hours and we must have shifts. We need everyone. And release for the boat, Cranyak men to get soldiers ashore. Boys and men, young and old together, Jon said. The cheers of the crowd could be heard far along the river. The next day, Robb walked about, shocked at the speed of transformation of his army. Many thick poles had been cut into long lengths, ranging from 18 to 22 feet. The poles were lashed into bundles like a giant's fence by the riverbank. The camp buzzed with activity, and working through the night by the light of a fire. Jon had finished the crane. The crane was immense. It was 25 feet high, with a cradle that easily held 2 connected poles in the basket. Robb had never studied building, but the key was the center block and tackle that held a long rope in a 5-pulley system. The rope extended down to a metal capstan with longer wooden handles. There, men could wind the rope, lift the pilings up to the apex, and then release. The force was magnified by an immense rock counterweight, which the capstan and the pulleys lifted until the poles were dropped down, smashing into the river floor. The Manderley men commandeered a barge from local merchants with some compensation, and the crane was loaded onto the boat. Experts from White Harbor practiced positioning and securing the boat in exact locations with sail and oars. Several houses, the Foresters, the Hornwoods, and the Whitehills, took charge of the timber and lumber operation. In particular, many of the Forester men were skilled lumberjacks. The mountain clans, Knotts, Walls, and Burleys, won the dice game for the honor of defending the far side of the river, and the Crannogmen rafted them over that morning in force. Robb was pleased that there had been no reaction from the twins, even as armored archers patrolled the towers. "It will never work," Euron Greyjoy said, drinking from a wineskin. "The poles are far too long, and they will snap from the current." Robb knew that many whispered the same in private. "It is certainly unusual," Galbert Glover said cautiously. "I had not known maesters were capable of such things. I thought all they did was talk about the history of kings and tell you not to eat and drink too much." "That boy is either mad or brilliant," Maggie Mormont said. "Perhaps he is both," Dacey said. Robb had asked Jon if he could help. Men from almost every single house pitched in, eager to attempt to do their best to fuck the Freys. Only the Boltons stayed distant, as their men claimed it was a complete waste of time. Most lords, even if they were privately skeptical, monitored the activity with care, as no one had witnessed such a feat of construction in their lifetimes. Jon's reply to Robb's question had been a chuckle and a smirk. His brother asked Robb, "How does a lord raise a banner?" Instead of guessing, Robb merely responded, "How? A lord tells his steward. How does a steward raise a banner? The steward tells his master at arms. How does a master at arms raise a banner? He orders his men. Robb, you are a lord general. Let your men handle this. All you need to do is to look pretty, feast with your men, and turn down wedding proposals," Jon said with a twinkle in his eyes. They laughed, but Robb took Jon's advice to heart. He walked about the camp, speaking to commanders, praising the hard work of the men, and smiling at small folk and nobles alike. He had no idea how the bridge would be erected, but he trusted Jon. Late in the afternoon, less than 36 hours from the rejection of the Frey offer, the first pier was ready. The 3 Karstark boy and Great Jon and Small Jon Umber were in the boat, close to shore with Jon, Wylus, and Matern Manderley. Great Jon clustered about in rafts, ready to bring more supplies. The great and small lords watched from the riverbank, and Robb held his breath without realizing. The logs were 1.5 foot thick, sharpened to a point a little above the lower end, and shortened slightly, given it was close to the riverbank. Logs were tied together in pairs with nails, boards, and rope, with a 2-foot gap in between. The piles were brought to the boat in rafts, and then the Karstarks and Umbers tied them to cradle of the crane, and lifted them high in the air. And then the 5 men drove the piles into the riverbed, not vertically, but leaning at an angle forward in the direction of the current. The boat then moved 30 feet, and then another set of piles with a similar 2-foot gap was driven at a similar angle against the current. Once both posts were smashed deep into the river, a large log 2 feet wide was placed directly into the slot formed by the gap. Then supporting posts were angled and tied to the pier on both sides. The Manderleys piloted the barge away, and minutes passed until the Northmen realized the structure was sound. Robb was too astonished to speak. The 2 sets of poles were kept apart by braces on the outside and the thick log in the middle. The angled pier held in place, and the force of the current actually locked the piles together. The bridge would rise 8 feet above the trident, so it would not be easy for the Freys to attack the structure with a barge. Jon stepped out from the boat, ignoring the boisterous cheers from the Karstark and Umber men. The small Jon ran about celebrating like a maniac, taking a long and loud victory lap. Jon went back to the command tent to consult the sketches of the bridge and speak to the boys to make sure more poles, rope, and nails would be ready for the days to come. "Gods, Jon, those poles stand. They are not falling down," Robb said. He expressed what many of his honor guard thought. Jon raised an eyebrow. "Of course they won't fall. This is construction, Robb, not destruction. But that is only one pier. The width of the river is 500 feet. We will build a pier every 20 feet, so that will be 25 piers. We are not finished either. The Forester and Hornwood men will saw more logs to connect each pier, and then we can lay sheets of wood, nailed together like planks on top, as a road. I also plan to drive more piles on the downstream side as a buttress to break the force of the river. We can lash some timber in the direction of the bridge on both sides to strengthen the connections as well. Jon mused. Master Snow, what else can our men do? Harry and Karstark asked respectfully. With a full day, we should be able to place down 5 or 6 piers, even with the extra work connecting the pilings. In 4 or 5 days, the bridge will be finished, he said. Using the crane will be very tiring. I hope your men and the Umbers can take turns. Jon exited the tent, leaving behind a flabbergasted crowd. He was tired from the long 2 days. 5 days later, as the sun rose high in the sky, Robb Stark and the Northern Lords watched from the tent as the last double-layered board was placed on the far side of the river, finishing the road. The bridge was complete, 30 feet wide and 500 feet long, as impressive as the stone crossing of the Freys. Canoes, holding Manderleys, Glovers, and Cranogmen, swarmed about the water, checking the poles and supports, and testing each pier. It had been a week since that fateful morning meeting, and Jon delivered the crossing in a day less than he asked. The men working on the bridge came back to the near side of the Trident, tired but cheerful. The entire northern host looked on with great anticipation. This was the moment everyone had waited for, to test the bridge, and see if it could bear the army's weight. Lord Stark, I would be happy to go first, Jon said. The wagons holding his equipment had been packed and loaded, and the boys from Wintertown were ready to go. Before Robb could accede, Maeche Mormont, dressed in furs and patched ringmail, and wielding her spiked mace, stepped forward. House Mormont requests the honor of crossing the Trident first, the she-bear said. But we don't know if it will hold, Jon said. You are Ned Stark's son. We trust him, and that means we trust you. The story of the bridge will be retold many times. House Mormon will be known as the ones who braved the crossing first, to spit on the Freys. The she-bear said. On that note, the men and women of House Mormont stepped forward with Daisy on a black stallion and Mage and her other daughters walking abreast. Jorwell and Lyra Mormont winked at Jon as they passed. The 500-plus fighters in House Mormont marched over the Trident to raucous cheers. There was no quiver at all on the wooden structure, and bellows of pride came from both the Umbers and the Karstarks. The bridge has held, Robb declared. The Mormonts have few horse. I should cross to test wagons on the bridge, Jon said. We would march next, Robiek Glover said. We have horsemen and wagons. We trust the bridge as well. His elder brother, heir to Deepwood Mott, nodded his agreement. Robb agreed. 800 Glover men and 200 horse crossed, with Jon urging that they space out the horses to keep weight well distributed on the bridge. Again, the structure did not quiver and stood sturdy and strong. Jon crossed next, and Robb honored his brother by riding by his side, the 2 Direwolves keeping them company. Jon's wagons carrying siege machines, tools, and equipment followed next. Whispers of the young wolf and the white wolf could be heard, much to Catelyn Stark's dismay. You have done a great thing, Jon, a delighted Robb said as they dismounted on the other side. The bridge is not perfect, Robb. A heavy storm could blow off planks. The Freys won't be able to knock out the piers, but they could damage the support posts or the top. Ripping apart the deck would make the bridge unusable until it is fixed, Jon said. You are too hard on yourself. The Freys took 50 years to build a bridge over the Trident. You have done it in 7 days, Robb crowed. The Freys are idiots. We are the Starks, and it was the combined efforts of the Northern Army. Many good men made the work much easier, Jon said. The 2 brothers sat in a comfortable silence, watching as the army marched over the river. Many knights saluted as they passed, and neither Jon nor Robb cared who was recognized. Only 2/3 of the army passed before sundown, as Jon urged caution in the crossing. The rest of the troops could have marched at night, but without enemies nearby, Robb decided to post a watch on both riverbanks and wait for the dawn. As night fell, Jon sat in the tent with many of House Stark's strongest supporters. After the events of the past week, even Lady Stark could not ban him from Robb's side. The she-bear, the great Jon, and Lord Serwyn wanted to lavish praise on Jon, but he happily deflected the credit to many helpers, a fact that Wallace and Wendell Manderley, Small John, and the Karstark sons appreciated. James' mind had already moved past the bridge. He was far more focused on the planning for River Run and listened carefully as Robb explained to his commanders what he expected as they approached the ancestral Tully Castle. Come! The morning, the Northern Army would ride hard south to break the siege. As Robb spoke about the rivers and terrain near the castle, a page from Flint's finger entered with great trepidation. Lord and Lady Stark, there are visitors. Several weasel-like faces waited outside the tent, their path barred by men of the mountain clans and Karstark soldiers. Jon saw the old man who had led the previous Frey delegation, Stephen Frey, and several grotesque figures. A fat, fleshy man with small, greedy eyes, a brawny man with a jutting jaw and huge muscles, an ugly man with a rat's tail beard, a weak chin, and watery red eyes. If these were the Frey knights, Jon felt even more certain that 15,000 of them would not be sufficient to tie the Stark family in a betrothal. Behind these men, there was a wiry figure with a black beard. He was young but escorting a group of Frey soldiers setting down a litter. The extremely old man on top was bald, his head spotted with age. He looked like a cross between a vulture and a weasel, with scrawny shoulders, skin dangling under a weak chin, a toothless mouth full of drool, and a hunched back. The only sign of his vitality were cloudy eyes that still retained a spark of raw cunning. Those ugly eyes looked at the bridge, and Jon saw flashes of anger and greed. Walder Frey, I have never seen you outside the twins. Catelyn Stark said, Lord Frey, call me by my title when you are next to my castle. Walder said. What do you want, Lord Frey? We have no need of your bridge, Robb said. There was no pretense of politeness, and Robb did not offer salt or bread. But young pup, you could use my soldiers, and you will need my bridge when you return, Lord Frey said. Several lords and heirs reached for their weapons at the insult, and more guards surrounded the Frey knights. We have a bridge, Robb said coolly. But how will you defend it when you leave? Wood bridges do fall apart, unlike stone, Lord Frey said, an ugly smile spreading on his face. What do you want, Lord Frey? Lady Stark asked, the anger barely disguised. I will not ask for your fool son's head. He will probably lose it soon enough. But your younger daughter in marriage, so you can use the crossing, Walder said. Robb's face was a mask of suppressed rage. But before he could lash out at the Freys, Jon put a hand on his shoulder. The White Wolf stood by his brother. We don't need to defend the bridge, Jon said. Ah! Lord Frey said. A similar confusion manifested on his children and grandchildren. Destroy the bridge if you can. But we will tell other lords and their maesters how to cross the Trident, House Tully, House Blackwood, House Mooton, House Piper, the Sea Guards, and the Vances. What will your bridge be worth when all the river lords can cross the Trident? Jon said. How dare you, Lord Frey squeaked. The Freys looked at each other, and for the first time the expression was fear and not stupidity. The Northern Army built the bridge in 7 days. How long do you think the river lords will take? Longer, perhaps, but they will send men and horses to defend their bridge, and no one will pay your toll again. Jon said. What do you want? Lord Frey asked. Jon nodded to his brother. Robb turned to the Frey men, proud and fierce as any king of winter, his eyes full of disdain. We ride to rescue your liege and my grandfather. You will supply me all your knights and men. They will swear loyalty to House Stark and serve under my commanders. We will use your bridge when we wish and pay no toll. There will be no marriages, Robb said. How dare you, Lord Frey said. If you do not, I will send plans of the bridge by Raven to every house in 1,000 miles. There will be so many bridges built that the Riverlands will be renamed the 100 Bridges. Robb quipped. If your men serve well, they will be rewarded just the same as mine. I will take a squire from the twins. They can join my battle guard along with the heirs of the north. If your sons fight bravely, I will speak with my lords about marriages for your daughters and grandsons. But nothing until they have proven themselves in battle, Robb finished. Walder Frey's tongue, born bitter, had sharpened greatly with the years. He was an irascible man who enjoyed fondling young women and firing barbed comments at anyone around, but faced with the destruction of his family wealth, he only stared hatefully at Robb Stark. He had expected a rich toll, but discovered instead that the wolves had sharp teeth. Very well, I accept, Frey said. the bile clear and present in his voice. Robb didn't care. Jon, however, watched Walder, his sons and grandsons, carefully.